we move on to our next speaker. I'm very happy and delighted to present a good friend and a great scholar who will be presenting now. That is Shri Koenraad Elst. Welcome, Koenraad. Koenraad Elst has his MA degrees in Sinology, Oriental Philology, and History and Philosophy, multiple degrees to his credit. And he also holds a PhD degree in Oriental Studies with a dissertation on a very interesting, fascinating topic that is decolonizing the Hindu mind, and an additional thesis refuting the claim for textual evidence in support of Aryan immigration. There's a lot of discussion happening around the Aryan immigration, Aryan invasion theory, Aryan migration. So Koenraad Helst has contributed immensely to this overall debate and also to show how this Aryan invasion theory that was there presented in the early part of the 20th century, how that the theory is filled with a lot of myths and many imaginary ideas. So his work has contributed towards that. And his non-conformistic positions laid down in some 30 books has earned him both boycotts and praise. I think in that way, he's a yogi who has the samatva buddhi. He's not bothered either by praise or boycotts. He has tasted both of them. These pertained especially to the communal conflict, the Aryan debate, the aberrations from true history, both in pro-Hindu and anti-Hindu sense. Apart from these worldly interests, he says, he has experience with Indian and Chinese forms of yoga and is also the board member of Belgian Yoga Federation. He lives in Leuven in Belgium and a very active observer of happenings in India. So with this brief introduction, I request Koenraad to lead us on this particular exploration, which actually connects well with where Nrityaji left. She said, the Indian mind is open to amalgamate things from wherever it receives. So Koenraad is actually coming in at that point where he is arguing that the concepts of Kuṇḍalinī and Cakra, though they were not originally from the Indic sources, they might have come from outside, which has got integrated to the Indian thought, especially in the Hatha tradition. So this is his thesis. We've listened from him directly. Over to you, Koenraad.
Namaste. This story today is not going to make me many friends, I'm afraid, because what I'm going to say is that one of India's major claims to fame, namely the chakra system, might not be 100% Indian. See, this continues the work of an English scientist called Joseph Needham. He was a great admirer of China. He put together a multi-volume work about science and civilization in China. It is exactly the sort of work that should be produced in India. There are bits and pieces in India, but not a groundwork of that scope. Now, about the topic of alchemy. And so the word nowadays in modern culture has a superstitious ring, but it straddles the border between, well, strange ancient practices and science. So it was Joseph Needham's contention that alchemy originates in China and found its way to Greece, Arabia, India. And in fact, the word alchemy itself, he says, is a Chinese word. Al, of course, is the Arabic article. But then chemi does not come, in his opinion, from what is usually said, from the Egyptian word for Egypt, chem, but actually from a Chinese word, kiemyak, which means gold liquid. Anyway, whatever the story. So he worked on this theory. After him, it has been like accepted and taken over by scholars like Thomas McEvilley and Samuel Geoffrey, but never really been continued. being further developed. So that's what I hope to do, or at least to start doing now. Um, so the main application of these this science, this discipline, one that everybody knows is Chinese medicine. This is attributed to the Yellow Emperor, who lived in China and was coronated in 2697 BC. Now, the interesting point is that he lived like a nomad in a wagon, and he won a battle near the border of Mongolia, and he's credited with inventing vocabulary, writing, and medicine. But the details about his life suggest that he was actually of foreign origin. And some Chinese scholars have said this, that the father of Chinese civilization was not Chinese. Okay, anyway, we get to know his name, his big reputation in about 300 BC with the appearance of a work called Kuṇḍalinī, the classic of internal medicine of the Yellow Emperor. And this ties in with a philosophy called the Yin-Yang school, or the naturalist philosophy attributed to a fellow called Zhao Yan. So you heard about all the Yin-Yang thing, the Chinese system of 5 elements, somewhat overlapping with, somewhat different from the Indian system. And so this, in the case of the Yellow Emperor, comes complete with the Chinese meridians and the medical practice of pulse diagnosis. This is all complete 300 BC. You know, there is no further development, or there is a little bit, but you see the system need not be invented. There's no indication also of it being imported. Another closely related discipline is called Waitan, which means external alchemy. And this is alchemy in the sense that we know it. It is practices to prolong your life or to make gold. Around making gold, I have nothing further to say. I am skeptical, of course, like most moderns. But you see, the practice of taking herbs in order to prolong your life, that is very important. In modern medicine, we can compare it with orthomolecular medicine. That is to say, taking supplements, mineral supplements, vitamin supplements, and so on, to further vitality and prolong life. In India, this is related to Rasayana, the path of the essence, and with people like Nagarjuna, Siddha. In India, interestingly, unlike in China, there are some critiques of the notion of longevity, where they think that longevity is in fact a demonic concern. You see, why waste important things like sadhana, striving for enlightenment, in order to go after prolonging your life, when of course life is short and anything may always happen. You can do any practices to prolong your life, but if suddenly somebody behind the wheel loses control and runs you over, then it's finished. And so, you know, don't bet everything on prolonging life. Anyway, so that's not a concern in China. And so people try to prolong their life this way, but they tried strange experiments, like taking lead or taking mercury, which actually can kill you. And so there are a number of victims of this practice, like the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. He took everything, and one day he, you know, by accident, he took too much of something and he died of it. So this practice of outer alchemy has gradually gone out of fashion because the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. However, the important thing is that it gave a terminology to another discipline called Naitan, or inner alchemy. And this is the practice of internal energy manipulation, including breathing exercises, including a number of physical exercises in order to promote vitality. And here we come close to what is in India, Hatha Yoga. So there are a number of exercises. Tao Yin, attributed to an emperor Yao in about 2300 BC. The story is that these exercises were originally developed to combat arthritis because it was a cold and a damp climate where people had this trouble. This is unlike India, where it's hot and where people are naturally supple and so on. So there are a number of technical differences, but the overall approach is the same as in Hatha Yoga. A number of standing exercises, static, a number of dynamic exercises. In fact, Swedish gymnastics that is practiced in schools was derived from it, but unfortunately minus the essence. You see, in these exercises, it is important to let the energy flow, to relax, whereas that aspect, the most important aspect, was forgotten in European gymnastics. Then you have a practice called feeding life. That is to say, doing breath exercises, especially in order to increase vitality. You all know, it's the same as in India. Yeah, I skip a few things. But so you have a number of breathing exercises. They overlap with Indian pranayama. I don't say that the one was transmitted from the other. I think once you start experimenting with breath, automatically you will discover more or less the same things. However, there is one thing very special about Chinese breathing exercises that is unlike in India. It is a practice called negative breathing, or Tuo Yue Kung Fu, which means the bellows exercise. I think there is a bellows exercise in pranayama also, but it's a different one. So this here means abdominal breathing, but with in and exhaling reversed. That is to say, when you breathe in, you pull the abdomen in and you bring the breath upwards. And it's when you breathe out that you relax and the belly fills up. And so this upward dynamic that is created is then let loose. And then when you breathe in, it goes up again. And so this creates an upwards dynamic. Aha. That is important because that has to do with raising an energy in the body. And this comes close to something present in Kuṇḍalinī yoga, the idea of raising energy. Like Lao Tzu says, Lao Tzu, the master of Taoism, emptying the head, filling the belly. Yeah, this is the general principle of breathing exercises, concentrating your energy in the lower body and emptying the head, that is to say, clearing the mind. Now, one exercise also close to Kuṇḍalinī yoga is called Xiao Zhou Tian, which means small circulation heaven, or usually translated into English as microcosmic orbit. So the idea is that with attention, you lead the energy in the back upwards and in the front downwards. And this you can do indefinitely for hours on end, just like in Kuṇḍalinī yoga. Like in the Kriya yoga practice taught by Swami Yogananda, This was a central exercise. I've been in India in places where people practice this. Very stubborn, you see, for an hour on end or so, they do this exercise. Um, this movement is marked by a number of stages. And so a number of points are defined along the spine and along the front part of the body. And these more or less, they are a part of the general system of acupoints. So in your arms, your legs, everywhere, you have a number of acupoints that are used in medicine. But some of these have this special role. They lie in the spinal channel or in the front channel, and they practically correspond with the Indian chakras. Yes, there also exists in China a practice, a sexual practice, where the idea is, just like in India, to retain the semen, because the semen gives charisma and so on. Like, for example, when Subhash Chandra Bose died, his followers refused to believe it when they heard that Subhash Bose had had a wife and daughter in Austria, because they thought it's impossible that a man with such a charisma can waste his sperm, because that's the source of charisma, right? So you have the same belief in China and in India, but the application is very different. In China, you had this idea coming from outer alchemy, where substances are important, that it is useful to practice sexual intercourse, but not come to the point of ejaculating. So you get arousal, but no wastage. Whereas in India, they are rather more simple and more radical and say, well, you see, then leave out sexual practice altogether. But so in both cases, you have this notion of urdhva reta, of upward seed, of seed being sperm being transmuted into energy, and this energy led upwards. Right. Okay. What does this have to do with India? It's about time I start about that. There was of course, there was Buddhism going from India to China, mostly overland through Central Asia. But there was also the reverse movement. And the basis, the vehicle of this is trade, particularly the trade in mercury, which is a basic substance of outer alchemy. And this was by sea from Guangzhou or Canton to ports in southern India, mostly Mahabalipuram. In fact, I've been to Mahabalipuram last year, and what I saw to my surprise was a picture on a rock of a Chinese dragon. You see, I mean, showing the closeness there of the trade with China. And indeed, you see, in South India, you have a number of Chinese influences, like in medicine, in Indian medicine, a number of Chinese elements have come in. You know, to my surprise as a layman, the oldest texts of Ayurveda do not contain pulse diagnosis, whereas in China it existed from the beginning. It does not consist the marma system of points on the surface of the body with medical applications. So that also existed in China. You have the system of 5 elements in the Chinese version, which is circular, you know, where the 5 elements succeed one another, whereas in India it is vertical. So it's a slightly different system. And so in south of India, in some medical treatises, this Chinese system is being applied, and so on. A famous case of Chinese influence on Indian yoga especially is the character Bhoganath. He was a medieval yogi in Tamil Nadu. He went to China, where he lived as a person called Bo Yang, was his Chinese name. He had a teacher there. Later, he had a pupil there called Yu. But finally, he returned to India, and he brought a number of Chinese therapies with him, like therapies for long life, for longevity, which he called China Chara, the Chinese practice. He is said to be so long living that he's still alive. He's supposed to be somewhere in a cave underground. Anyway, so this connection with China is not something I invent. It's not something far-fetched. When you start looking for it, there's quite a bit of it. Now, it could only enter India because in India, a yoga tradition already existed, and this was integrated into it. You see, other countries haven't taken this over because, you know, it was too foreign to them. Whereas in India, it was close. For example, there is a practice called Mahamudra. And now the word Mahamudra has a number of different meanings. One meaning in this, for instance, in this Kriya Yoga tradition of Swami Yogananda that I mentioned, means a practice where you press the leg against the belly, then you stretch the leg, grab the foot, and then come back. Yeah, all this in a state of inhalation. Then you come back and then you push the breath out. So this is in fact an application of reverse breathing. You know, where you first breathe in, then you go through an exercise, you come back, and then you breathe out. Meanwhile, your breath is all upstairs, so to speak. Or you have a practice which has been popularized by Yogi Bhajan, and I know that Yogi Bhajan is a controversial figure, but you see, these modern gurus have at least the virtue of borrowing a lot of classical exercises that otherwise might have gone lost. So a practice called Satkriya, where they sit with their arms stretched up and their breath also taken upstairs while breathing in. They take the energy upstairs, and then they sit there for a while, closing all the lower bandhas, muscle openings, and then they breathe out, they come back, and they relax. So for this tradition, happy, what is it called? Healthy, happy, holy, this tradition of Yogi Bhajan, this is like one of the most important practices. And so this fits in with this this practice of Kuṇḍalinī yoga, of going upstairs. Yes, Vinaya Chandra, I'm practically ready. I have a list of more similarities, like spontaneous movement. When you are rather tense in your standing exercises, for example, you start to breathe simply to release energy. You see, in India too, just like in China, you have traditions where this practice exists, and so on. I mean, a number of. So finally, you see, what I want to say is these practices have existed and can easily exist separate from yoga. People like Patanjali didn't need these practices. In the Buddha, in the Gita, and so on, you find descriptions of yoga, instructions of yoga, where there is no Kuṇḍalinī, where there are no chakras. So this is something that came on top of it, that was added to it. Strictly speaking, you can do without it. Also, the converse, Kuṇḍalinī exists without yoga. You see, cultures that didn't know yoga at all, like the San or Bushmen in South Africa, like the Australian Aboriginals, they also had practices of what they call heating the back, where you generate a hot energy in the back that goes up. So, I mean, if there is any truth to such things, they can be discovered anywhere. And so I mean, they're a bit overdone nowadays. I don't know how it is in India. In the West, they talk about Kuṇḍalinī and chakras all the time. And so I think that, you see, they have been well integrated in India, but they're not that important. The one thing, and this is where I want to stop, that is remarkable about India is that they have worked out the system of energy centers by combining it, by marrying it, so to speak, with the Sankhya system of 5 elements, action organs, sense organs, and then the mind as a coordinating between those. So they correspond with the 5+1 chakras. So that's typically Indian. You see, that doesn't exist in China. Clearly, they have taken a basic inspiration and then turned it into something fully Indian. Okay, thanks.
Uh, Thank you, Konrad. I request Professor Paturiji to offer his comments because he has to leave for his classes, and then we can take a couple of questions.
Namaste. Thank you, Dr. Elst. It was a wonderful historical analysis of the chakra system, and that was a good point that you made that these amalgamations are done in India, borrowing things from different systems. I remember a question on the mythology list by that Patrick McCall, Australia, who is very much bent upon stopping India from financially benefiting its yoga campaign. And he once asked a question about, it seems he was asked by one of the Indian organizations in Australia to write an introduction of Panchakras. And then he brought this question on the list and asked whether there was any mention of chakras in the Upanishads or Vedamantas or anything. And then I was, as an answer to him, I was mentioning Narayana Sutta and Kathopanishad. In Kathopanishad, you have Shatam Chaika Chakradisya Nadyaha Tasam Udhanam Avinistaika. This mantra is talking about the same location where Anahata Chakra is located. And this Mudha is the place where the Sahasrara Chakra is located. And this part of the Upanishad is talking about a movement from Anahata to Sahasrara. And it is also talking about Navya. And it is giving a bigger number than just 3, Sushumna, Ida, Pingala. No, it is talking about Satasya Aik, 101 Shatascha Aika Nadya. And you have other scriptures like Narayana Sutta, where we are talking about Padma Kosha Pratikasham Hridayam Chapya Dhomukam. And you have Hridaya again, the same place, Anahata place that is mentioned there. And there you have Padma again. See, the chakras are taught alternatively in terms of Padmas also. The chakra model has Padma model also in it. And you have Padma Kosha Pratikasha here. And probably the amalgamation that you are talking about is it did not happen on an empty space in yoga. The ideas of other chakras probably than Anahata and Sahasrara places that we are mentioning from this Narayana Sutta and Kathopanishad, were probably amalgamated into a system which was already existing. A system in Upanishads that you are able to see certain spots of the body where attention has to be paid. And in Chandogya Upanishad, you have an explanation of Angushtamatra Purusha existing in various states like Swapna, Sushupti, and Jagrat, where the Angushta Matra Purusha lies in Swapna, Jagrat, and Sushupti avasthas. There again, it is Anahata spot, and during Swapna Sthiti, as per Chandogya Upanishad, the spot where the Angushta Matra Purusha lies is coinciding with the Vishuddhi Chakra area in the neck pit, in the pit of the neck. And you have the idea of the Angushta Matra Purusha spreading during the Jagrat Sthiti throughout the body. And you have the ideas of Angushta Matra Purusha in the Dakshina Netra. You have the Angushta Matra Purusha ideas in various portions of the body exist, being described in various different mantras. So probably if there was a borrowing and systematization of the chakra system borrowed from somewhere else, it was not being done on a completely empty space. It was, there was already a comparable system here. There were already slots existing, and probably the amalgamation was done on that slotted system that was already available for amalgamation.
Thank you, Professor Pottery, for those comments. And we understand that you have a class and you need to take leave. So we look
Dr. Elst,
forward.
I think, is responding.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, the oldest mention of chakras that is tried that I've heard is in the Atharva Veda, where it is said that man has 9 gates, meaning the openings of the body, and 8 chakras. Now, nothing else is said about it, you know, and so chakra, literally wheel, and of course means a center or something. But, you know, there, the actual system of chakras that is historically known in the Satchakra, Nirupana, and so on, is not there yet. And there are no applications mentioned of it. Of course, a few problems that you have there as a historian is that you have no writings prior to like 300 BC. Of course, you have many older traditions, but that have been put into writing as soon as writing appeared. And then I know that, again, there are also theories that say, well, somehow, we don't know yet precisely how, but there was writing anyway. Anyway, so the thing is that, and then secondly, you have oral culture on purpose. You know, as soon as there was writing, there were still traditions being taught, guru to shishya, not being divulged. So the fact that something appears in writing only late still does not prove that the tradition itself was only late. So I know, you see, that there are, you know, I mean, this is work in progress, you know, and this needs more minds. Like, for instance, one problem that I have here is my limited knowledge of Indian texts. Sanskrit literature is oceanic. And so, you know, what we learn in our training is some of the classics, the Gita and so on, but there's so much more. So you see, I don't exclude that I have missed important information that is there within the tradition. But you see, those things all need to be looked for. However, you can see some examples of where the yoga system has shifted towards the notion of energy centers where it was not there in the beginning. Like, for instance, everybody who does this nowadays very popular Vipassana retreats, it starts like yoga classes all over the world with breathing exercise. And so there you have to concentrate on the point where the breath comes in the nostrils. That's not specifically an energy point. Whereas in China, where, you know, Buddhism has gone through the influence of Taoism, of the Chinese tradition, the focus is on the point below the navel, and that is the energy point par excellence in the Chinese tradition. So there in Zen Buddhism, you systematically concentrate the breath in the point below the navel. So there's been a shift towards energy points that wasn't there before. But true. I mean, of that I have no doubt at all that the Chinese system was fitted into an already existing Indian system or germ of a system at the very least. So of course this was not all new, and it is no coincidence that India took this information and did something with it, whereas for other cultures it was lost. They never integrated it at all.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And even the Nasagra concentration, Nasagra focus is also mentioned in very ancient texts, Veda and Veda mantras and Upanishads and Brahmanas and Aranyakas. This Nasagra focusing also has got to do with Agnya Chakra, Agneya Chakra, and you have already this from Chandogya Upanishad. You have Anahata from Kathapanishad and Narayana Sutta. And if you go on looking at all these things, and then roots of Vijnana Bhairava Tantra and the Shaivism in Sankhya, and then roots of Sankhya in the older texts. And then you see the David's triangle, David's star kind of the opposing triangles and the Bindu in the beginning, and they getting integrated with the chakra system later in the Meru Prastara and other perspectives. Then, when you look at these things from the point of view of hidden energy, hidden spiritual energy being awakened, energy awakening formula, then Kundalini is also that. So, the spiral formula for Kuṇḍalinī or its location at Mooladhara probably is a borrowing from experience. But the ideas of a hidden, dormant, sleeping entity being awakened through a particular practice is already there in the older systems. And the name for it, for example, on the European side, you have mana kind of ideas. And that mana, which is similar to Amrita, and you have that Amrita here in Kundalini system also. Amrita coming from Sahasrara point of view, from the Chandra, and that Piyusha, Pana, all those ideas. So probably India never disagrees with the proposals of borrowing from outside, but I think it will be more meticulous, more nuanced to see that the borrowings were done onto a system which was already existing in a different way, and amalgamation led to a new system.
Okay.
So thank you, Professor Paturiji, and thank you, Dr. Koenraad Elst, for this interesting and new perspective. I'm sure with the passage of time, with the more research and the work that even you are doing, will contribute towards this whole debate and discussion that will ensue from what you will be doing.
Professor
May
Karna,
I add one small point?
Yes, Professor Kannan, only that we are running short of time, but yes.
Yeah, it's only a very small point. Apart from the fact that Shatanchaika Hridayasya Nadyaha in two Upanishads, occurring in two Upanishads, Katha and Mundaka, we also have the reference to 72,000 nadis, both in Chandogya and Brihadaranyaka. And that's not a small detail. There is a consistency between the two Upanishads in the reference to the 72,000 nadis. And in Aitareya, we also have Vidritirnama Dwaha. So it refers to the fontanelle or the Brahmarandra Sthana. So as the point of the entry of the Jiva. So this is also a recognition of an important center of the body. Am I right?
No, I think so. Yeah, it's not exactly the system as we have it, but yes, I mean, there are certain germs where you see, as soon as the system of the energy points, the way it is practically used, with, you know, 5 corresponding to the 5 elements and so on, and then 1 coordinating one ajna. As soon as that came about, and everything fell into place, but still, you see, to say that there are numerous, you know, symbolically said, what is it, 70,000? There are numerous nadis. That's a very general statement. Whereas with the chakra system, we get specifics. And so that is still a jump. And so we do not see that growing in India. Suddenly that chakra system is there, fully made. And you know, you don't see it developing. So one possibility, of course, is that we have little writings for, you know, in those circles where they were busy with this, they preferred not to write, and this system has been growing for centuries, and only later it was confided to writing, and then of course it ran wild, and everybody ran with it. That's one possibility. But you see, because of the data within China itself, I have the impression that it was lifted from there and fully brought into Indian culture and then integrated. But again, I repeat, you see, this is research in progress. See,
Correct.
many more data can be added.
Yes, Dr. Elst. So, yeah, we will look for more data to come in and to see how this argument and thesis develops. So, we look forward to hearing from you again and again. So, thank you very much
Okay.
for this bringing this fresh light into this whole discussion.